Are you looking for an overview of the San Jose, California real estate market as of May 2020? Are you wondering if the shelter in place has had an effect on the prices? Well, stay tuned as I look through week by week data as well as the closing stats for April 2020. Hi, I'm Theresa Wellman, a local San Jose, California realtor, and I love to look at data and empower my clients with real information so they can make the wisest decisions for themselves. So today we're going to dig into the computer, into some charts and data, and really understand what's really going on in the local San Jose, California market. So let's jump right into those charts to get an overview of the month-by-month data and then dig into some of the details. Okay, here we are at an overview of the San Jose single-family market for May 2020. This is April data, that's closed data. So comparing March to April, the prices actually dropped and the number of sales actually dropped. I believe these are both largely because of the shelter in place, and I'll explain more why a little bit later. But we did see a softening of the number of sales, and therefore there's not as many sales to average, and there's not as many high-end sales probably in there, which has dropped the average price. So today's San Jose is still technically a seller's market, although it is a softer seller's market than we were experiencing in February and early March before the shelter in place. I'll get into some details about this a little bit more. We still have a days of inventory of about 35 days. With the closing data of April. And you'll see a little bit later on, I am tracking this week by week with the pending data to give you a feel of how the actual market is behaving week by week, and it's a little bit different, a little bit slower than that. So the pending sales are down 19% comparing to the previous month, while inventory is only up 40%, and the sales price to list price ratio is still 103.9%. So there are still some properties selling over asking. Some of that is probably still also an influence of properties that went into contract before the shelter in place and closed in April, right? So for example, if you went into contract on March 14th, 15th, 16th, even 17th or 18th, your property was shown and marketed as normal and probably did have multiple offers that drove that price over. I know I have one example that went into contract on May 18th that sold quite a bit over asking, so that is swaying that sales price to list price ratio a little bit. But shelter in place has definitely affected sales, including how much over people are offering and how many offers properties are getting. The prime, really highly desirable properties are still getting multiple offers, but much less, more like 2 or 3 instead of 5, 6 or plus that they were getting earlier this spring. So there's currently 343 active, well this was as of the close of April, and 289 pending, meaning 45% of the single family homes are in contract. That's way down from before the shelter in place with the data last month of 59% in contract. So definitely again showing the market has slowed down as you would expect with the shelter in place. So let's dig in here to the details of the San Jose real estate market, and we're looking here at a chart from 2012 all the way through current month of April 2020. And you'll see at the bottom I've highlighted the years to make it a little easier to follow. In 2017, early 2018, as we know, were very strange years with extremely low inventory and high sales, which drove up those prices. And you can see our market is pretty cyclical based on the year. So 2020 started off just like 2019, very strong, but 2020 even stronger. And the data coming in for April shows a drop in those prices. It also shows a drop in the green line, which is the number of sales, and inventory continuing to go up, but not nearly what we would expect for this time of year. Inventory would typically be much higher if you draw a line across here. We're even lower than what there was in 2017, if you believe that or not. So pretty low inventory, but the sales are softer. So let's talk a little bit about the week by week market, because I feel this has been an important thing to track, and there was a lot of fear with shelter in place and what it was going to do with the real estate market. So I've been weekly tracking this. You can definitely check the link down below in the description to my blog where I weekly update this data. Obviously, this video that you're watching, I will update once a month, and that's another way to get a good snapshot. But if you're more curious or wanting to be hyper-focused because you're looking to buy or sell really soon, of course you can reach out or comment below so that I can personally answer you, but you can also check in the blog and keep watch of what's going on. So the sales the first week were obviously generated partially by properties advertised before the shelter in place. And then you see a very slow, that second week of shelter in place, sales were way down. And I think because people were fearful and trying to figure it out. Then they started to increase a little bit more, and we're averaging a little under 50 sales or above 50 sales, right around 50 sales a week. And the interesting thing is this week 6, there was a lot of anticipation in the market, maybe of the shelter in place being removed, I don't know. But we had 75 pending or houses go into contract. Now this last week of week 7, with the announcement that we're going to continue this shelter in place, I don't know what happened, but definitely the sales responded and were a little bit less. But as you see, 65 sales is still much stronger than what we experienced through most of those early weeks of the shelter in place. And inventory again continues to rise slowly. 8% increase this last week, and you saw a 13% decrease in sales, but that's because we had such a huge increase the week before. So we're pretty balanced here. Let's look at the next slide. This shows 41% of properties available in contract, slightly less than the end of April data showed when I talked about it previously. So this is what I really like to track, is the days of inventory metric. We will put a link to the video and up above regarding the days of inventory metric if you don't understand what that means. But that basically means how long it will take to sell all of the homes on the market currently at the current rate of sales. So it's basically how much inventory is sitting on the shelves, if you will. So we have a little over a month, or 43 days of inventory. And as you can see, that shelter in place before was really low, like 20 to 25 days of inventory. That first week, everything froze and it went way up to 88. And that is getting very close to a buyer's market. But then things started to pick up and sales started to move, getting us back into, a softer seller's market with about a month and a half worth of inventory. So I thought 2020 was going to be more like 2018, of course, before COVID hit, because these numbers were crazy. But coronavirus has really kind of slowed the market down and made it comparable. If you look up to what we were experiencing in 2019, we're almost right on. Granted, the numbers are different. The inventory and the sales are both decreased, but the relationship of the two is very similar to the market we had last year. Obviously quite different than 2018. So something else that I've like to talk about and mentioned, and I mentioned in my video 1 month ago about has coronavirus changed housing prices. I will link that video above and down in the description if you haven't seen it. But basically in that video I talked about how the last several months the housing prices had softened and the stock market continued to increase. They were in opposition, and we don't see that very often here in Santa Clara County. Typically the average home price tracks the stock market, and a lot of that has to do with the RSUs and the big tech companies here in this area. But because we had such an opposition, and then coronavirus hit and the stock market took a huge crash, we all know that, a big, huge drop, there were a lot of people forecasting that home prices were going to take that same drop, like 20%. And I chose to disagree with that information because I saw this huge difference of the stock market and the housing prices already that had occurred. And that's very unusual, as you see by these yellow circles. Doesn't happen very often. This is a 20-year chart, and only 5 instances are highlighted where these two metrics went in opposition. So the correction of the S&P 500 back up to a little over 2,700 and the slight correction in housing prices has brought those two numbers back in alignment. So I do think there's probably going to be a little bit of volatility still since we're not out of the coronavirus shelter in place, but I also do believe that we're going to start to hover or fluctuate just a little bit around this range that we're hopefully going to settle in. So that's great news. So the last aspect that I like to really track is as interest rates and unemployment. And we all know unemployment has gone up quite a bit. There's not any recent numbers that are reporting April statistics yet, but most of those jobs were retail jobs or jobs that are not able to be done from home. And I will tell you that the buyers in San Jose area are typically high-tech buyers because of the price point. Those are the people who can afford to buy. And most of those buyers are working from home and still have income and still can make a purchase. And if they were planning to make a move, honestly, it's a better time to make a move now because there is less competition to get in a house and a little bit more leeway to negotiate with sellers. So it's a great time to buy because interest rates, look at these interest rates. Wow, they are historically low. So they had popped up a little bit in mid-March, right when the shelter in place happened, and then they've started to settle down. We're seeing a little fluctuation, but still under 3.5% for most borrowers. That is really phenomenal interest rates, historically low, looking 50 years plus. So it's a great time to buy and a great reason to jump in the market and help sellers out who are looking to get out. So anyway, I really appreciate you listening. Please do comment below if you have any questions that I can answer, or feel free to sign up for my monthly market updates. The link will be below. And also check out the raw data on my website where you can look at your specific neighborhood and how it is performing compared to the averages.